The Packers are in training camp. State Fair starts this week. Where's summer? I'm Charlie Sykes. Sunday Insight starts right now. And they're already talking about back to school sales. Good morning. Welcome to Sunday Insight. In the week that was, Milwaukee's Common Council lifts the cap on the number of taxi permits and opens the door to transportation apps like Uber and Lyft. The world mourns the victim of a downed Malaysian airliner. The death toll rises in the Gaza Strip as Israel pursues its offensive against Hamas. In Milwaukee, another shooting leaves 2 children wounded. Senator Ron Johnson's lawsuit against Obamacare is tossed, but a federal appeals court deals the health care reform a huge blow. But we start with a new poll in the race for governor. A poll that shows a dead heat. Governor Scott Walker holds a 1 percentage point lead over Democrat Mary Burke among registered voters, 46 to 45%. But among likely voters, Burke has a slight edge, 47 to 46%. In May, Walker led 48 to 45 among likely voters. Now, also in the poll, 54% of voters say the state is headed in the right direction, and 66% say that Walker is someone who can get things done. But Governor Walker's favorability rating dipped, with 45% of respondents saying they approved of the job that he was doing, 47% disapprove. Joining me on our panel this morning, the Milwaukee Community Journal's Mikel Holt, former state representative Michelle Litjens, political strategist Lynne DeBruin, and the managing editor of WriteWisconsin.com, Collin Roth. Okay, Collin, we have half the voters in Wisconsin say they have no idea who Mary Burke is, but she is tied with Governor Scott Walker. How is that?
Scott Walker is tied with generic Democrat. This state is 50-50. This is something we've known all along. The last 2 polls really show that out. Governor Walker doesn't have a very high ceiling, but he also doesn't have a very low basement. This is going to be a close race. Okay, now the good news for Walker is the people think the state's headed in the right direction, but generally it's bad news for an incumbent to be underwater, 45% favorability. Yeah, and I think the big thing that's happened in the last 2 months between these polls is those banner headlines about the John Doe and the criminal scheme. Those were likely to take a hit. We'll see what happens with that.
Okay, Lynne DeBruin.
Well, I think, as Collin said, the bottom line is this state is 50-50. Yeah. The folks that love Scott Walker love him. And there's very little bad publicity that could affect that. And then those who don't like him, and not much good publicity could change that. So Mary Burke, on the other hand, hasn't made massive mistakes in the last few months. I think she could do a better job getting her name recognition up, because that's still, there's a lot of people who still don't know who
that is rather extraordinary, isn't it, that you have 49% who don't even have an opinion of her. I mean, as low as Walker's approval rating is, her approval rating is in the 20s because she hasn't registered with the voters yet.
Yeah, she really, I mean, that's the big twist, that to get that last small percentage of undecided voters who will determine the selection, she needs her name recognition.
Okay, so should Walker be nervous about this poll?
Not necessarily, and I think we also have to look, they had over-screened Democrats in this by +8. I think they are looking at the voters when they're doing these polls more like 2012 turnout rather than 2010, because we know that Republicans are far more motivated to vote this fall than Democrats are. So I think that those numbers might be a little bit off-kilter because they oversampled Democrats.
Okay, Mikel Holt.
Well, I think the key is who will define Mary Burke, since most folks don't know who she is, which is very, very surprising this late in the game. But will the Walker people be able to define her, or will she be able to put some of her millions of dollars into the race so she can define herself?
No, I think that's exactly the right question, because as Collin Roth points out, right now she is generic Democrat. She's anybody but Walker, and there are apparently about 45% of the electorate that are going to vote for anybody other than Scott Walker. But they have no idea who Mary Burke is. So there's certainly an opportunity here for either the Walker campaign or outside groups to define Mary Burke before she can define herself. This is getting late in the process to have no public profile whatsoever.
Right, and I think that, unlike what Michelle said, I think Democrats are highly motivated to get out, not so much because they adore Mary Burke, but because they don't like Scott Walker.
Well, that's the other thing, is this poll did not suggest that Republicans were far more motivated to get out here, and I do wonder whether or not 2 things are at work here. as Collin pointed out, you did have this screaming and misleading headlines in the Journal-Sentinel about, the governor and the criminal scheme. Clearly, that had an effect in holding his numbers down, erosion of independence. And you wonder whether or not Republicans and conservatives might have gotten a little bit complacent over the last couple of years. This poll ought to eliminate that complacency, wouldn't you say?
Definitely. I think people need to remember they need to stay fired up. They need to make sure that they get out and vote this November. But I do think nationally we are seeing a trend where Republicans are far more motivated to get out and vote this fall, and we're going to see that happen in Wisconsin.
So what's more important for Governor Walker, to raise Mary Burke's negatives or to raise his own positives?
Well, that's a great question.
Yeah.
But I think obviously the strategy they're employing right now is trying to define Mary Burke. That's why we see the ads, the various ads about her background, about her resume. There's a huge opportunity there where they can explain who Mary Burke is before she can define herself.
Okay, well, what about this question? This poll, which is getting a lot of national attention, will it encourage some of the outside national groups, liberal groups, labor groups who would love to have, Scott Walker's head? Will it encourage them now to up their game and to come into Wisconsin?
It would seem that they would. I mean, Scott Walker's been a target of big labor unions and national groups. It wouldn't surprise me if they start to come in, particularly with 2 polls in a row showing a dead heat.
I agree. What has your glass half full and what has your glass half empty this week? Let's go around the table. Michael Holt, you're first.
Well, my glass is half full because thousands of baseball fans get the opportunity to pay tribute to Negro League Hall of Famers Ted Toles and Sonny Weston yesterday during the Milwaukee Brewers Negro League tribute game. But it's half empty because these tremendous athletes and pioneers never get the chance to showcase their talents at the major league level for reasons that continue to plague America.
Michelle Litjens.
Well, my glass is half full because Congressman Paul Ryan laid out a much-needed common-sense approach to ending poverty in this country. But it's half empty because I fear the administration would rather complain about poverty than actually do something about it.
Lynne DeBruin.
Well, my glass is half full because the death penalty is being used in 38 states. But my glass is half empty because last week's 2-hour execution in Arizona was the 3rd botched execution this year. Justice should be swift. And while the Supreme Court says it doesn't have to be pain-free, it shouldn't be cruel and unusual.
Collin Roth.
My glass is half empty because Senator Johnson's challenge to Obamacare was dismissed in federal court. My glass is half full because other challenges to the law, like the Halbig case, are moving forward.
Well, my glass is half full because Milwaukee Aldermen lifted the cap on the number of taxi licenses and opened the way for services like Uber and Lyft. It's half empty because, of course, they couldn't help themselves. They imposed regulatory roadblocks that will make it harder on the companies and, of course, on consumers. Next on Sunday Insight, outsourcing jobs becomes an issue in the race for governor. The war over outsourcing escalates. The CEO of Trek takes out a full-page ad objecting to Governor Scott Walker's campaign. But Walker's campaign fires back by releasing a second ad targeting Mary Burke and her family company's outsourcing of jobs to countries like China.
She forgot to mention that they make 99% of their bikes overseas, in places like China, where her company has outsourced jobs for years.
Now, Burke says the ads are unfair because Trek is a great Wisconsin company that has created more than 1,000 jobs here. Who is winning this back and forth, Lynne DeBruin?
Wow, it's kind of neck and neck at this point, but I think ultimately it's going to be Trek and by extension Mary Burke, because when a pro-business governor starts attacking a highly respected business in the state of Wisconsin that adds $100 million to our economy, our state economy each year, that eventually is going to turn off not only pro-business folks, but voters. And I think he's starting to cross the line of going too far. It's okay to attack Mary Burke, but not Trek.
Do you agree, Collin Roth?
I think the issue here is about credibility. Mary Burke is telling Wisconsin companies that they need to pay their workers $10.10 an hour. She is trying to encourage them to insource jobs. Yet, if a company came to Mary Burke if she was governor, how could she make the case that they should do this when she's made her fortune by sending those jobs overseas?
Well, and not to mention that she wants Wisconsin companies to pay Wisconsin workers $10.10 an hour and says, well, yeah, that wouldn't affect my company because we're paying, what, $2 an hour in China.
You know, what has really been interesting has been the silence from the labor unions. I would have thought that they would engage themselves in this conversation. The one thing I did hear from them was very, very interesting. They said only because she outsourced all these jobs, or Trek outsourced all these jobs, are they able to maintain a 1,000 person workforce here in Wisconsin. Now, I don't know how true that is, but Seems like that's where they're going to go.
You wonder if that's acceptable for every other business in Wisconsin to do the same thing. But I think the interesting part of this is because Governor Walker went and attacked her this way, it's completely changed the dynamic because now Mary Burke is defending sending jobs over to China, which I think is ticking off her base in the process. And it might be turning them off.
This is the key thing. I mean, you know, Lynn was saying this is going to turn off some of the pro-business. Look, the pro-business voters are going to be voting for Scott Walker. There's nothing that's going to, he's not going to lose his base on all of that. This is playing on her side of the field. He is going after both her base, her natural Democratic base, but also undecided voters. She's got two things on her resume. She's got the fact that she worked for Jim Doyle as Commerce Secretary, which has some issues to it, and the fact that there are these jobs at Trek. Now, I think Trek's a great company. I've said this on the air. I own Treks. I like the bicycle. But it's a legitimate question. Have you built your wealth by paying people $2 an hour? Now, they're saying this is untrue, but they're not answering the question. So if the Walker campaign is wrong about that $2 an hour, then why won't Mary Burke say that?
Well, I think they are trying to say that that's a part of their subcontracting.
99% of their
but if you fight over it, I think that where Walker gets hurt by this is the fact that, you know, back in the last presidential election, outsourcing was fine for Walker. So part of it is the kind of the hypocrisy of the flipping on that issue for him. It's not just about Trek and Burke. If it was just about Trek and Burke, then she would lose. But he's beginning to look hypocritical in these areas.
Well, I think she's the one that looks hypocritical because, you know, again, and you watch her refusal to answer the question on this. And generally, my experience has been when a politician doesn't want to answer the question or changes the subject, there's a reason for that. And there's a reason why she doesn't want to talk about the $2 an hour wage they pay in China. Now, you may not want to hear it, but we're going to tell you anyway. Let's hand out some unsolicited advice. Mikel Holt, you're first.
Well, mine is to residents of the 58th Assembly District. I met this past weekend and was extremely impressed with Tiffany Kaler, a moderate Republican candidate who was also an Army veteran. And as an African American, she would make history if voters do the right thing and elect her.
You didn't mention she's a Republican. Michelle Litjens.
If you're traveling abroad in the near future, I'd trust flying into Israel, but maybe not the Middle East or Russia.
Lynne DeBruin.
Trek Bicycle Corps employs 1,000 Wisconsin residents, generates $100 million yearly for our economy, and makes more bikes in the United States than any other company. So my advice is for our governor. Attacking Mary Burke is fair game, but attacking the company that your own administration praised in 2002 for having Wisconsin's best business practices is hypocritical and bad for Wisconsin business.
Collin Roth.
To Paul Ryan, stay strong. Your courage and leadership on poverty is vitally important for conservatives, but you can expect to be assailed by defenders of the status quo.
Well, my unsolicited advice is to Dane County District Attorney Ismail Ozan. Ismail, if you're going to run for Attorney General and be part of the secret John Doe investigation of conservatives for allegedly violating campaign finance laws, you probably shouldn't be filing incomplete and false campaign reports for your own campaign. People will think that's ironic. Next on Sunday Insight, who has the edge in the race to replace Tom Petri in Congress? Republican Congressman Tom Petri has held the seat for 35 years, but his announcement that he was retiring has set off a scramble in the 6th District. 3 Republican candidates have taken to the airwaves. Here's State Representative Dewey Strobel.
Dewey Strobel, small businessman, job creator, conservative outsider for Congress.
I'm Dewey Strobel.
Here's State Senator Glenn Grothman.
But if you'd like a proven conservative who will tell Washington enough is enough, vote Glenn Grothman.
I'm Glenn Grothman, and I approve this message.
And here is State Senator Joe Lightbaum.
Washington could learn a lot from Wisconsin about cutting spending and lowering taxes. With your help, I'm going to teach them. I'm Joe Lightbaum, and I.
Okay, Michelle Litjens, who has the edge in this race? This is your backyard.
I live in the 6th District. I know all 3 of these individuals. I like all 3 of them, and this is going to be a tough one to call. I think this is really just going to come down to their personalities. They all believe in the same thing. They are all going to vote the same way if elected to Congress, and so this is really just going to come down to their personalities.
Okay, now you and I are both going to be participating in the debate on Tuesday night up in Fond du Lac County. Is this a race between, is this going to be decided by personality, by geography, ideology? What is money? What is the determining factor of that?
That and exposure. I think having a primary in the early part of August, people don't know that it's coming, and a lot of people in the 6th Congressional are not going to participate unless they're told about it.
Okay. Michael Holt.
I can't believe that you said that you like Glenn Grothman.
I do.
The one who stands up there and opposes Martin Luther King holiday. I think Lieberman probably has the best chance, because if all of his family, if his siblings all voted, he would automatically win. He has, what, 20 or 50 brothers and sisters? And then plus he has a very nice commercial, and I think that's going to determine the race.
Okay, Collin Roth.
These gentlemen are all conservatives. They all have very similar voting records.
Yeah.
I think there is an added element that in Wisconsin we're used to having leaders in Congress. We've had Paul Ryan, we've had Ron Johnson, we've had Jim Sensenbrenner. I think that might be an added factor in what people are looking for in what is probably going to be a pretty low turnout primary.
Okay, but what's interesting about it is, and I agree with you, they're all ideologically the same, but it has become a negative campaign, and you do have attack ads. Dewey Strobel is going after Glenn Grothman and going after Joe Lieberman for being career politicians, getting special interest money. Does that play with the primary electorate? It'll be interesting to see.
Yeah. I mean, we've seen around the country, we've seen a bit of anti-incumbency around the country, and whether crafting oneself as an outsider as opposed to a career politician. Yeah. We'll see how that plays out.
Are you surprised that it's become negative? Because, I mean, there's not big ideological difference. Are you surprised that they're attacking one another?
No, I think in a primary like this, in which it's a wide open field, in which the differences between them aren't very big, it doesn't surprise me.
I think Lieberman has got the leg up because his state Senate district covers more than the rest there, and he and Strobel both have about the same amount of money. Grothman has far less money, so I think I think it's more his race to lose. But you never know; it could be a surprise.
Okay, I actually think you're probably right that he has an edge there. But with Dewey Strobel attacking Lieberman, you do have that dynamic in a three-way race where the third guy can come up. And I think the money is somewhat misleading because Grothman has raised a lot of money. Remember, he's the only one of the three who's going to be going back into the legislature. He's going to be able to raise money. I would not be shocked at this point if Grothman is edging up in this particular race. I think Lieberman is the favorite, but do not write off Glenn Grothman. Now, what is it that you don't get this week? Let's go around the table. Michael Holt.
Well, what I don't get is why the handful of black politicians who seemingly hate Sheriff David Clarke don't understand why the masses of black folks love him.
Michelle Litjens.
Well, Charlie, what I don't get is why Nancy Pelosi would like us to treat unaccompanied children coming to this country like the baby Jesus, but she doesn't show the Christians who are being persecuted and killed in Syria the same kind of love.
Lynne DeBruin.
43-year-old African-American man suspected of selling illegal cigarettes died after New York City police used an illegal chokehold on him. Since the video clearly shows the illegal chokehold and the man saying he can't breathe, what I don't get is how NYPD can defend their actions.
Collin Roth.
What I don't get is how Senator Ron Johnson can be out front on so many high-profile issues, but a new poll shows that 40% don't have an opinion of the senior senator from Wisconsin.
Well, what I don't get, and Lynn mentioned this before, is why states like Arizona cannot figure out the way to administer the death penalty without meeting almost every definition of cruel and unusual punishment. Next on Sunday Inside, our panel picks the winners and losers of the week. But first, here's your morning news update. It's time for our panel to pick the winners and losers of the week. Michael Holt, you're first.
Okay, hold on to your hat, Michelle. My winner this week is Congressman Paul Ryan, who has introduced a comprehensive anti-poverty program that incorporates many Democratic Party concepts. My losers, the poor. Democrats have overly stated their opposition to Ryan's proposal solely because he's a Republican. Now you know why I remain politically independent. Because partisan politics in America is sickening.
Michelle Litjens.
Michael, you were fantastic. My winner is Tony Dungy. He was confident enough to say what most people think about drafting Michael Sam. He said the NFL should be about merit, and to paraphrase, everything else is just a distraction from the game. Well said. My loser, unfortunately, is the city of Milwaukee. Not only did its residents say it is one of the 10 worst cities in the country to live in, but with the Wild Wild West shootings that continue to ravage some parts of the city, it's making it a city people are afraid to visit too.
Lynne DeBruin.
An undercover report by Dragon TV sparked a food scandal after it showed Chinese plant workers using meat in their products that was months beyond its expiration date. Dragon TV is my winner for doing investigative journalism in a country that censors the news. On Thursday, our top military commander, General Martin Dempsey, warned that Russia's escalation of violence in the Ukraine has sparked a rising tide kind of nationalism that could destabilize Europe. Like others, Dempsey blames this dangerous turn of events on my loser of the week, Vladimir Putin.
Collin Roth.
My winner is Staff Sergeant Ryan Pitts, who was awarded the Medal of Honor this week for standing his ground in a vicious firefight in 2008. My loser, Tom Barrett's gun hotline. After a month, the hotline has produced 45 calls and no substantial leads.
Well, my loser, Obamacare, which may be headed back to the Supreme Court, a federal appeals court, said the law actually says what it actually says, and its strongest supporters are just sick about that. My winner is Paul Ryan, who last week unveiled a sweeping bipartisan anti-poverty plan. Now, whether he runs for president or not, the move reestablishes Ryan as the intellectual leader of his party. Thanks for joining us, and join me for my radio show Monday morning on News Radio 620 WTMJ from 8:30 until noon. Have a great week.